to this Variety Artisans special report. I'm Jazz Tangcay, Senior Artisans Editor, and we are here today to talk about the Academy's decision to reformat the live show and taking the winners of 8 categories and disallowing them to give their acceptance speeches live. We're also going to talk about the critical part of those crafts and their importance in storytelling and filmmaking. So without further ado, let's meet our panelists. We have editor Myron Kirsten, who was nominated this year for Tick Tick Boom, hair department head Mia Neal, an Oscar winner for 2020's Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, composer and editor John Ottman, who won Best Editing Oscar for 2019's Bohemian Rhapsody, director Ben Proudfoot, who was nominated this year for documentary short subject for The Queen of Basketball, and 16-time Oscar nominated and 2-time Oscar winner sound editor Randy Tom, who won for 2004's The Incredibles. Hello and welcome to you all.
Thanks. Great to
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here. So let's start with what it felt like to be nominated. I know we always hear it's such an honor, but I want to hear from every single one of you what it feels like, whether you've had your first nomination or whether you've had, in Randy's case, 16. But Mia, you made history when you became the first Black woman to be nominated in the makeup and hair category. You made history when you won. But talk about that nomination morning in 2020 when you heard your name alongside Jamaica.
Absolutely. And Sergio. I think it was unbelievable for all of us. You have the build up to it, so you kind of have a little bit of an expectation, but there's just no way to tell. So the feeling, honestly, the whole thing, when I sum it up, it is, we all work so many hours. We do so much in our individual crafts, right? But when you get that recognition from other people in the same field, it is like joining a sorority or a fraternity. It's almost like, oh, you see me and you like my work. And it is just a validation that is unlike any other. I could see people like, oh yeah, you did so-and-so, I love that movie, or oh, the hair, and this was great. But it's something about other artisans in this field operating at that level to acknowledge your work and feel like you deserve an Oscar for it is so next level. It really is. And it's just something that I have so much gratitude for and appreciation that, that feeling will never die down.
Myron, what was it like for you this year on nomination morning to hear your name?
It was a pretty out-of-body experience. I think that I've spent most of my career with imposter syndrome, thinking that I wasn't good enough or what I was doing just wasn't good enough. And so to be recognized by your peers in that way, you finally get a little validation, and it makes you want to be better, ironically enough. It makes you want to just keep pushing. And I think I was mostly in shock for a good 24 hours, having seen my name there next to, this year of cinema has just been amazing. There's just been so many great films, so many great musicals, just inspiring me, and my fellow nominees or the work they have done is just incredible. I was alone when I first saw my name, and I'm watching on my phone, and I'm like, and of course I yelped when I saw my name, and then my whole family was asleep, and Lynn called me up, and then John Chu called me up, and they're like, wake up your family, what are you doing? And I was just like, oh yeah, well, this thing happened, I had no, so it just means the world to me to, how, like what Mia was saying, to be acknowledged by your peers. And it's just, it's an incredible feeling.
And what about for you, hearing your name and hearing the Queen of Basketball be announced on Oscar nomination morning? What was that like?
I was sitting right here in my kitchen. It was dark outside.
5 a.m., right?
Yeah, it's a full body emotional experience. And for us, as a documentary filmmaker, yes, it's exciting to be recognized by your filmmaking peers, but it's, we're really an ally and advocate for the storyteller in the film, in this case, Lucy Harris. So for us, it's a huge win for her and her family and her story to be recognized in this way. I think for me, that was the more powerful emotional response. It was a win for closing the gap for her between her significance and her recognition.
Randy, what is that feeling like for you to hear your name heard, over, your incredible career? Like, take us through that, what that means.
The Oscar is such an icon in world culture that there's nothing that can prepare you really for getting the news that you've been nominated for one, especially the first time, but the feeling never really goes away, and the confusion and exaltation never goes away, no matter how many times it happens. The first time I got nominated, I was in my late 20s, and I was nominated for 3 different films in the same year. And it was just a matter of luck, having worked on these 3 particular films over the previous couple of years, all of which got nominated in the sound category. Never Cry Wolf and The Right Stuff and Return of the Jedi. And The Right Stuff won the Oscar. And in my confusion, my main worry was that I was going to thank the wrong group of people. As has already been said, just maybe the best thing about being nominated, certainly about winning, is the level of respect you feel you're getting from your peers. People who don't do exactly the same kind of work that you do, but who have a pretty good idea of the challenges involved in doing the work that you do, and people who perform at a very high level in whatever craft they're in. And it's that respect that I'll come back to later in our talk today, because I think it bears on the recent Academy decision to change the broadcast.
John, talk about what it's been like for you. You straddle, two crafts. You're a composer and you've served as editor, but talk about being nominated, what that's like.
Well, I was asleep because I just ignore anything else, even a nomination. I'm a glass half empty kind of person, so I just assume it's not going to happen, whatever. And I guess by the time everyone dreams of getting an Oscar. Let's be honest, But then by the time your career gets to you're so jaded, 25 years into it, you're like, well, whatever, But when it happens, of course, it just all that suddenly just that emotion bubbles to the surface because of everything that the journey you went through in that particular movie, not only your career up to this point, like for me, but the movie itself that you had a journey on, and a journey of hell sometimes, And so it's I think the nomination in some ways is, look, it's great to win, but the nomination in a way is more of an honor because the people who know exactly what you do, and been to the same trenches and understand your craft, nominated you. And so I think for that reason, the nomination is such a, as everyone's been saying here, such an acknowledgement of your peers acknowledging your work. Yeah.
And I want to touch on what you just said about that walk up, here, the envelope opens and you hear your name, and that walk, that's the fun part of watching the ceremony.
Yeah.
Is
I
following the
gotta
camera,
say,
like talk about.
Speaking of that fantasy that we all have had about getting an Oscar and so forth, I thought when I was a kid, like if I've ever got an Oscar, I'd be petrified, because it's like almost a billion people, at least when I grew up, watching the Oscars. And I thought I'd be so scared. But the funny thing is when it happens, and I don't know if it's the same for everybody else, you just forget you're even on live TV. I did, and I think because of modern technology, the cameras are so hidden. You don't see any cameras anywhere. All I see is the people I know in the audience, and the venue is a lot smaller than you think it's going to be. The theater's not so big as you think. And so you just walk up there, and I honest to God was not nervous at all, because I think also you're on adrenaline that it just happened. And my biggest fear was I didn't memorize any sort of speech, but I just had one thing I wanted to say in the end, which is about what Freddie's father had told him in the movie, good deeds, good something. I can't remember now, but I was so afraid I would forget the order in which his father said these three things to Freddie. And thank God at the end of my speech, it's like, at least I got that right, but that was the only thing I was really worried about, because the rest of I had no preparation for going out there. I just knew generally what I would say.
Randy, what about for you? What was that walk like for you?
It's a out of time, out of body experience. Getting up from your chair, and you kind of are numb, but you realize that there are people around you who are congratulating you, and I don't remember, what my feet were doing, or, there are often lots of steps to climb, and you think, I don't want to make a complete fool of myself by tripping on the steps. But it's a dream-like experience that I wish everybody could have.
Mia, last year, due to the pandemic, the Academy ceremony was reformatted. It wasn't done at the Dolby, it was done at Union Station. But still, talk about what that was like, hearing your name, walking up to that stage.
Ooh, well, that was, first of all, I was so nervous because a little bit of a backstory to it was that originally they said only one person could speak. So there's three of us, and they said only one person can speak because of COVID. We don't want multiple people on the microphone. So I was like, okay. And originally they said 90 seconds. So I said, listen, everyone, give me 30 seconds of and I'm just going to listen to it over and over again. And somehow we all got it was such a good plan. We didn't do it. And so the night before, Jamaica handed me something, and Sergio texted me something in Spanish. And I was like, I don't speak Spanish. And I was like, Sergio, I can't get up there and try to learn Spanish. And he's like, it's not hard. I'm like, okay. So, and then they cut the time down. The night before, we got another email saying it's not 90 seconds, it's 60 seconds or faster, or they're going to cut you off. So honestly, my entire thing was, I was overwhelmed with needing to respect the Academy's wishes around the time limit, around not wanting to, and finally, right before we went up, Sergio just looked at me and said, listen, just honor your ancestors when you go up there. And also because of the situation with Jamaica and I being the first Black people, period, ever nominated or to win in this category, it was also just sort of known that, this moment is not really about us. It was so much bigger than us. And so there was also a responsibility to honor that. So to be completely honest with you, I was very nervous. And a lot of the excitement of it all was a little taken away in the moment, just because I was so afraid of not honoring the people that were on the stage with me, not honoring the people that came before me. It just was this overwhelming pressure to acknowledge all of these things and to do it very respectfully. And so afterwards is when I was able to take it in. I think, walking with the Oscar and they put the name, the brand on, and it was like, okay. And I feel like those moments were a little bit more personal and more about me, But it the whole thing was an honor, and yeah, I very quickly, I have to add this in there. So I am a theater lover. Okay. I got into this business because of how much I love theater. Okay. Musical theater, the whole nine. It's me. Okay. And I branched off into film and TV. I'll be honest, I more so did it for financial reasons. Okay. But I have a love for all of it. The wig building, the creating characters, all of that. I do both hair and makeup, but my unit only allows me to do one. So my focus is on hair. There are certain award shows that don't acknowledge hair and makeup at all. Okay, my passion is theater. The Tonys do not acknowledge what we do. I make molds of people's heads. I build wigs strand by strand. I went to Juilliard for this. I went to all types of operas. I've worked at the Santa Fe Opera. I've worked at the Metropolitan. I've done all of these things, right? And when each genre is completely different. And so you learn all of these intricate crafts, right? I mean, I'm sure even with sound, right? It's like, there's opera, it's acoustics in the house, it's this, it's like knowing all of these differences. And you have to know them, you need to master them, or you won't work in that field at that level, period. So one of the only high level things that acknowledges what my craft does is the Oscars, right? And so it is painful to think of that not getting the same respect as other things, because one of my biggest arguments when people talk about the Tonys has always been, if the Oscars acknowledges what we do, how come the Tonys doesn't? Right? And this takes a little notch away from that. It just does. And I say that with all due respect, because I understand what the Academy is up against. They have low ratings. They are trying to figure it out financially, how they add more things on, how they make the show larger. I just don't think this is where the fat is.
Yeah, one of the tragedies about this decision is that, as you say, the Academy has traditionally been one of the most egalitarian of all the major awards giving entities. It's included more of the crafts and treated the crafts more on an equal basis than the others have. And so it's just tragic that they've decided to backpedal on that and become less egalitarian and establish more of a class system, et cetera.
Well, they've also become, in this decision, less about movie making, and they're the Motion Picture Academy of Arts and Sciences. And yes, it's entertainment, and the shows need to be entertaining to get people to watch. But I think part of the intrigue of the show is that people are moviegoers, and they talk about making the show for the common man or everybody and so forth that aren't necessarily in showbiz, but the common man wants to open up the hood and see what's going on underneath. The common man wants to go through Willy Wonka's factory gates and see how it's done. Everyone wants to know how the sausage is made, and I bring up Bohemian Rhapsody as an example too, because the best scenes in that film are when again, the hood is opened up and you see how it was all done, how Bohemian Rhapsody was put together. That's what people want to see. And on an award show, if you show an audience a minute long, really well done documentary, it's very hard to boil down in a minute or a minute and a half what we do, right? But they can make it intriguing enough where they unveil the magic for a moment for the audience. Then show some movie clips. Audiences love watching movie clips. They'd much rather watch those than a dance number. And so I think this is a huge moment of being completely out of touch with their own existence in a way, where they're supposed to intrigue the audience with the craft of movie making, not distract them by a tap dance number.
Myron and Ben, you were both on the town hall call that was delivered by Zoom. I mean, talk about being there when the blow was delivered.
A lot of grumpy people. I think it was just a surprise, and I think there's kind of like two conversations happening, right? One is, the sort of hurt feelings and sort of how the news was delivered, and that I think is its own thing. And the other is the sort of larger philosophical question about how, artists and craftspeople and filmmakers now and in the future will be recognized, and that the Oscars do that in a way that doesn't impinge on any perceived importance of any one category over the other. I don't know about Myron, but I think people were disappointed and hurt, and in some cases angry, and I think understandably so. At least for me, in the time since, I'm much more, I'm out of my feelings about it and more into my mind about it. And I also think that I understand the context more. You know, I don't have as much context as my colleagues on this call. So I've been trying to educate myself about the fact that, you know, this is been a long conversation about whether or not categories should be removed from the telecast altogether, et cetera. And I think, you know, in as much as I think we can do better than this decision, I am glad that somebody's made sure that at least all the categories would be in the telecast itself, which, as the leader of a team that's trying to get Miss Harris's story out there to the widest possible audience, I am grateful for.
Yeah, you summed it up pretty well. I mean, you go from this being the one outside of like getting married or your kids being born, like one of the greatest moments of your life, to shock and confusion and, you know, a bit of anger and sadness. And for a minute, I think you're just processing like, well, it doesn't even matter that I'm nominated. And you're just taking a lot in, and it's again, it was a bit of an overwhelming feeling to be told on a Zoom, where at first you think it's this town hall Zoom that's, oh, this is really exciting and goody. This is another great thing that I get to do with the Academy. And then this information is delivered. So I think that maybe there wasn't enough thought about delivering the information, or I even think that maybe they should have done it before the nominations were announced. That would have kind of helped a little bit just to prepare ourselves. But look, I acknowledge also that the Academy has a huge problem in their hands. Now they have to not only compete on live television with all the kids who are on TikTok and the thousands of hours of other programming at any given moment, to get people hooked in for 3 hours. That is nearly impossible. I mean, this is what we do as filmmakers, trying to keep people engaged. You know, live television is a tough thing. It's a bit of an antiquated thing it needs to be modernized. And so I don't know what the right answer is. I personally love seeing how the sausage is made. When there was one year when the Academy showed a little blip, a little package of how editing works, and it got me so excited. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is what we need to do every year, is just educate the audience. You know, this is why I love this panel, because I think it's an opportunity to educate the audience about what we do. You know, editing is the invisible art, which is, you know, you get caught up in the storytelling, so you don't notice the editing anymore. And with a musical, especially when you can do that, which is they're often so aggressive editorially, you know, that's even more special. You know, I do want to say that I believe that films and art can change the world, but it's also a business. So I understand that, but from the Academy's perspective and from the network's perspective, and also there's really big things going on in the world right now that are much more important. And so I'm trying to like put that all, you know, in consideration and not get too caught up in it. It's just, I think the initial shock was intense, and now it's, you know, it's starting to move away. And I do hope that other people speak up. Whatever happens isn't going to change that I'm denominated, or that I made this incredible film next to all these other incredible films. So anyways, I'm very grateful, and nobody's going to change that.
You mentioned, you know, you wish more people would speak up. And earlier this week, Myron, you and I were in the room where it happened. Guillermo del Toro did actually speak up, you know, on a larger, you know, note that it takes a village to make a movie, and this is not the year to silence voices. Randy, I know you had some thoughts on that. What were your, you know, and he's the only one, Del Toro, right, as of recording.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that more of the nominees are not speaking out, because, you know, people who are nominated are notoriously careful about saying anything controversial at this point in time, when they don't know whether they're going to win or not. But it was incredibly brave for Guillermo, and I've worked on a couple of his movies, so I feel like I can call him Guillermo, to make the statement that he did. And I do disagree with part of his reasoning, which was that this decision to change the broadcast shouldn't have happened this year because everybody works so hard. That's essentially what he said. And everybody worked especially hard because it was a COVID year. And I guess my response to that is that it's really not about working hard. There are, on a big movie, there are hundreds of people who work very hard on every film to get every film made. It's kind of a miracle that any film ever actually gets made. It's such a monumental task. And so if getting nominated for an Oscar was about working hard, then there should be, 100 people nominated for every film. So everybody works hard. What it's really about is those crafts that revolve around making artistic decisions. And what really offends me is that somebody in the Academy would claim to or imply that they know which crafts are more important and more deserving of respect and time than other crafts. That is just a silly notion. The impact of the cinematography in a given film is not necessarily more important than the impact of the editing on the film. The composer can sometimes, save a film where the casting didn't work as well as it should have. And so on any given film, there's this kind of unpredictable mix of elements, and you never know really what's going to work and what's not going to work until you're finished with it. And sometimes even then you're not sure. And so this idea of prioritizing the crafts and suggesting that certain artists are more important than others just offends me deeply.
The key thing is every single one of you, whether it's, short film, short documentary, makeup, editing, are integral to the world of filmmaking. Mia, talk about, and you sort of touched on it already, but talk about hair and makeup and what a movie would be like without that, and your process. And I'm going to use, you've got a wealth of film behind you, but so often people say, I don't see the makeup in that. They look so natural. I think, John, we were talking about that earlier, but talk about your craft and what you do.
Listen, if anyone is questioning it, did anyone see any of the news anchors during COVID when they didn't have hair and makeup? I mean, during COVID, I was like, we should all double our prices because rates should go up. We saw some of the rawest forms of, when people were unrecognizable. I think that's it, is that when you do a good job, people don't really notice it. That's the whole point of what we do, right? It's really creating a character. And I think, recently over the summer, I worked with Noah Baumbach, who I really enjoyed working with. And he really I love working with the director who respects every individual craft, right? And puts a lot of time and focus into each and every last one of those crafts that are contributing to the film. And Noah was like that. And he, has these ideas and you have to come up with things very quickly. And I can remember putting on, I don't want to give it away because the film has, but one of the actors, I put a wig on him that he didn't want. And when I put it on, his whole character came to, and Noah kept looking at me like, do you see what's happening here? It was like he had the award he had on, but with the final touch of putting that hair on, he started talking differently. His whole body posture changed. And it's like that type of thing, right? Where it is a final touch. It is like, removing this person who, we know, this actor, removing them and really creating this character and changing them. And hair and makeup plays such an essential role in doing that, where it not only disguises that person for the audience, but it disguises that person for themselves, where they don't see themselves anymore and they can actually like go into and then from there and say, this person's posture is this, and they walk like this, and they fidget. And, we get to see all of that happen behind the scenes. And then it looks effortless when you see it on the screen, but you don't realize, that was 3 weeks worth of prep and research and going to the library and pulling this information and, talks and meetings. And there's a lot that goes into it.
I could chime in about sound. A few years ago, when I worked on the film The Revenant, directed by Alejandro Inarritu with Leonardo DiCaprio, Alejandro told me, the first thing he told me was that if we don't completely believe this bear attack, the entire film falls apart. And so the very first thing that I worked on in The Revenant was the bear attack. And most of you probably know that the bear in the film that it attacks Leo was computer graphics. There was no real bear. When I first saw the footage, there was nothing that even looked like a bear. It was a guy who looked like he was in a hazmat outfit wrestling Leo, on the forest floor. And so it was up to me and the team that I work with to make that sequence absolutely organic and convincing and believable. And it was damn hard. And it was very hard to get it to a point where either I was satisfied with it or Alejandro was satisfied with it. That bear has to express a whole range of emotions. It's a mother bear who's trying to protect her cubs. And so in some moments she's nurturing. She needs to sound like she's nurturing. In other moments, she needs to sound like the most vicious creature you've ever encountered. And at a certain point, she becomes mortally wounded. So we had to figure out how to make her sound like she was dying. And all directors will tell somebody like me that sound is important in their movies, but some really walk the walk. And Alejandro did, and he made it clear to me that that bear attack was priority number one, and I think it did absolutely help the movie accomplish what it needed to accomplish.
Randy, whilst I have you, people want to look under the hood, as we've been talking about. Explain to the audience the difference between sound mixing and sound editing in a nutshell, for those, because that was the great part about what we want to learn. Like, I would love to see this on the Academy Awards, whether they get an A-lister or whether they get the master of the craft, being, this is what makeup is, this is what it would look like, this is sound mixing, this is sound editing, and composing.
The irony, given our discussion today, is that the sound branch of the Academy decided on its own, with no prompting, to eliminate the two sound categories and make it one sound category. It used to be that there was an Oscar category for sound editing and another Oscar category for sound mixing. And on our own, we decided to make it one category, in part to help the broadcast. And so that was especially insulting to us when, after we had made that sacrifice to get rid of one of the sound awards, that we were still treated like second-class citizens. The difference between sound editing and sound mixing. One maybe useful analogy is the difference between production design and cinematography. The production designer, art director's job is to gather and design and make objects that will eventually be photographed. And so that's analogous in a way to what a sound editor does. The sound editor's job is to gather and synthesize and record, sound objects, if you will, that may or may not eventually be mixed into the film. And then the mixer's job in some ways is analogous to the cinematographer in the sense that in the mix, you have all of these sounds that have been gathered. And then the job is to figure out which of those sounds to focus on from moment to moment, and how to focus on them and how to filter what we hear from moment to moment. So that's the best I can do off the top of my head.
John, composing is a field that has been, is a category that has been relegated to the hour before the live show. Talk about how composing works and why score is important to storytelling and the art of filmmaking and TV shows.
Well, I mean, the music is the soul of a film, or I guess so you would say a television show or whatever. It's basically and we've all seen how a score can make or break a film, just as any of our crafts can make or break a film. But I would just say that the score is the soul, and it literally can define what the film is, or clarify, I should say, what the film is, and it can make a film elevated, or if it's a bad score, the reverse effect. So, I mean, again, trying to boil it all down, that's basically what the score is all about. You know, the editing is sort of, and I say this as a composer. I mean, the editing is you can't have a film without an editor. There's no film that exists, no matter how many people did whatever they did, you know. It's also the most nebulous, I think, craft out there for people to understand, because it is the most invisible craft, unless it's a particularly obvious scene editorially, you know, if expository editing and so forth, explosion scene or a dance number, whatever, that can be sort of, people can understand what editing is. But and I think we've been raised on a generation of watching, when we're in an airplane, this has been edited for, you know, for the whatever, or TV movie, this has been edited. So the implications, editing means removal, you know, and therefore it's also kind of a bad term, editing. I think in Europe they call it the compositeur or whatever, you know. That's what they call the editor, is the compositor. But editing, an editor is basically the architect of the film. There are different degrees of how powerful an editor is, depending on the relationship with the director and so forth. But basically, even with a hands-on director, the editor is sort of directing every facet in post-production, you know, from visual effects to even storyboarding scenes with the pre-visual department, previs department, to being there and directing the sound mix. And there's just nothing that the editor is not involved with in the film. So that's why I just say it's basically to try to people. You can't really explain editing except to say it's the architect. And just like with any of the crafts, a film can be a terrible film or a great film depending on the editor, you know.
Myron, talk about editing. I mean, you've done musicals, but you've also done Crazy Rich Asians too, working with John Chu. Take it away.
Look, I think that, you know, we're like a cook in a kitchen, a master chef. We're given a lot of ingredients, and we're making a really great meal for you to enjoy. And when I was in college, I made a lot of art. I was actually an architect in architecture school as well at some point. But then I went to art school, and I would make little collages, and these were things that I would find on the street, or somebody would give me something and I would build them into these like little art objects. And I think editing is no different, where we're just taking all these amazing crafts and we're boiling it down into a film. And that could be like, instead of a bunch of things found on the street, you know, it's like thousands of hours of footage that we're then distilling down into a story. And, you know, I think that, you know, I think that we're like the co-director, or, you know, we're definitely the last screenwriter. And and probably, you know, one of the most important parts of making a movie. It's very important part of, you know, the whole process. And, you know, we're the longest, we're on something maybe from 8 months to 3 years. You know, it could be to say that we're like the co-parent, it really is our baby after, you know, we're done with it. You know, we have our hands in everything. We work with every
We're also the
single
psychologists in post, because everyone comes to the editing room to complain and you know, and sort of confide in you, you know. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, we're there's a, you know, we're trying to make the studio feel good about, you know, what we're making, and the producers, and sometimes, you know, the actors will come in and, you know, they're worried about a particular performance that they did on the day, and you're like, well, we're protecting everybody. And you know, there's over 2,000 edits in Tick Tick Boom, and every single one of those was done with care and love. It's not just slammed together. We are thinking all the time about every decision we make and how it affects the entire film. So, but again, what I said earlier, like if so much of our craft disappears and you just enjoy the film, like that's amazing. And then you could also use powerful edits. You know, Anne Coates made one of the most powerful edits ever with the blowing out of the match in Lawrence of Arabia to the Sahara Desert. You know, there's a moment in Tick Tick Boom, it's the last shot of the film before Andrew Garfield is about to blow out the cake, and then we cut to black. Like we had the moment where he could blow out the cake, but we decided not to, because it was so much about like, what is, you know, will we make it to 30? You know, anyways, I can go on and on about it. I just feel that I'm happy that editing found me, and that I get to be such an important part of this craft, the making of films and television, and you know, hopefully the audience and people who want to make art will be inspired by what we do.
One of the stories that illustrates the mystery and invisibility of what editors do, I think, better than any other, is the Coppola film The Conversation with Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman, you know, plays this guy who records people's conversations surreptitiously, and it turns out that an important part of the story was actually never in the script at all. It was invented in post-production by Walter Murch, the editor. This idea that Harry Call mishears this recording that he's listening to, and through the whole film he's listening to it over and over again, but you don't find out until the end that the kind of filter of his brain and his own preconceptions are altering what he's hearing, and he's not hearing correctly at all what's being said. That happened because Walter Murch, as the picture editor, was recorded the actors just wild, you know, without a camera around, saying those lines. And during one of those takes, Fred Forrest said the line wrong. And at some point, this little light bulb went off in Walter Murch's head, and he thought, "Oh, maybe I can use that." And meanwhile, Francis was off directing Godfather 2, and he had turned the conversation over to Walter Murch and Richard Chew to try to, you know, make sense of. And that's the kind of completely invisible creative influence an editor can have on a film. You would never know that by merely watching the movie.
Right, exactly. And the other thing people don't know too is that, you know, you'll notice editing and say, oh, that's a great editor because that scene was so snazzy and cool. But the major job of the editor is really to sit back and see the thing as a whole. And this is the thing that's another invisible thing that no one knows, is like, you have to sit back and watch the film from A to Z and say, how is this feeling? How is this working? You know, how is the story being, how effective is the story I've just told? And that's the macro phase of editing that also is completely invisible and actually the most crucial. You can do a scene that's really cool, but it means nothing if the whole story is as a whole is not working, and that tweaking is a major part of what an editor does and to tell the story.
Well, Myron, just briefly talk about Sunday. And the reason I'm thinking about that is because that was not shot with everybody in the room, or that great reveal as we see this incredible homage to Broadway. It wasn't shot in one go. Like, it was numerous shots all edited together so that it appears as one incredible number. I mean, briefly unravel that scene and talk about how it came together.
Yeah, because of the pandemic, they didn't want all these great Hollywood legends like breathing on each other, and singing out loud. So they had to shoot them in, tiles, and we had to put them all together as if they're there seamlessly. And that's no easy feat at all. It's hard enough to like get anyone to sing, in sync and make it feel grounded and put that together. But then you have these Hollywood legends are coming in sort of, 1 hour here, another hour there. And then 7 months later, we did it again with more Hollywood legends because Lynn wanted even more of these, Cheetah Rivera wasn't available the first time around, or, the cast from Rent. So that process took over a year to sort of get together and meticulously edit together, fit them in, try not to break the song. And then of course we had a lot of VFX, a lot of development, research, and development of like trying to make this fantasy version of the Moondance Diner come alive. And, those are the things that you don't, and then when you're just watching it, you just get, it's just a celebration of theater and Jonathan Larson. But there's not much more to say than, again, you're not supposed to know any of that. You're just supposed to enjoy the musical number and just, marvel and, oh my goodness, like I've never seen all these Hollywood musical theater legends together.
Ben, just as important to filmmaking are the short films. So many filmmakers, they start off telling short stories, short documentaries. The Queen of Basketball is 22 minutes, and that's no easy feat either, like telling this incredible story. Tell us about, making a documentary short and why shorts are important to craft of filmmaking.
I think the tendency in the past has been that the shorts categories have been an area where young filmmakers can, come onto the scene. I think it's been an area where, that's kind of like a student format or a calling card format. And more or less, these films have been inaccessible to the wider audience since, basically shorts stopped playing in movie houses until recent years. The Queen of Basketball is on YouTube. Millions of people have watched this short documentary. And I think the documentary short form in general is ascendant. And I think it's moving way beyond simply a starter format into a form of cinema that everybody can come to. It's also, as we think about democratizing cinema and opening the doors to everyone who has talent in storytelling, the documentary short has the lowest barrier of entry. It's the least expensive form of cinema, the documentary short. And yet it can have the same impact, I think, as a $100 million feature film. And so as we think about, how do we make sure that the most talented storytellers in the world are making cinema? To me, the documentary short is the most exciting corner of cinema for that reason. And so, I'm curious to see how this will go this year in terms of how the show actually presents itself. But thinking ahead in the decades ahead in my career, I think we're going to see more and more people are interested in this category for all those reasons. And that goes too for live action and animated shorts as well. These aren't just cute films by aspiring filmmakers. These are, you don't go to the Louvre and they say, well, here for free in the lobby are all the small paintings. And on the second floor are the medium-sized paintings. And then for an extra fee, you can see the really big, important paintings on the top floor. It's a strange line that we draw in the movie business that I hope changes as time goes forward. But I in general, I think, I lost my dad a year and a half ago, and I remember I was just thinking as everybody was talking about their individual crafts. His liver failed. And I remember the hepatologist coming in and explaining that the liver performs 500 functions a day. And one of those functions, isn't working. And that's why your dad is going to pass away. And I think all of us who know cinema know that all of these categories are vital organs in the body of cinema. And I hope that in the future we can get back to a place where all of those categories, all of the things that we have devoted our lives to, can be on equal footing during the telecast.
Well put.
Yeah, wonderful.
Well put. Thank you, everybody, for this incredible conversation and your insight. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jazz.
Thank you.